US government default risk is rising. How might this all play out? All right, to be clear, this is the world's highest income generating entity in human history that has a printing press that is the world's reserve currency, and we might choose to let it default. First of all, we've been here before. Back in 2011, we had a similar scenario play out. The stock market fell 16% before recovering most of it by the end of the year. The more interesting response was in the bond market, where interest rates actually fell and then remained low on expectations of continued low growth. Let's talk about two potential scenarios here. Scenario one is we default and interest rates are surging simultaneously. In scenario two, we default, but interest rates are plunging lower. The interest rate response is going to make all the difference with how the government actually responds to this. Default with surging rates is going to be viewed as a catastrophe. It's going to be an all-hands-on-deck response to the emergency. Assuming Congress doesn't respond to what would be an inevitable panic, Treasury is going to have to do a lot of different things. This could include selling some of their $5 trillion of assets held, minting the $1 trillion coin, and potentially even buying back bonds using new bonds. Now, all of this is gimmicky to some degree, and that could undermine confidence in markets, which actually could make the interest rate spiral worse, which is going to result in the big bazooka, which is a huge Federal Reserve response. Now, the Fed has stated that they wouldn't intervene, but I think if things got bad enough, they wouldn't really have a choice. So in this scenario, I think they're forced to go in and support the interest rate market. That means they're going to implement a huge quantitative easing program, probably going to end up funding Treasury directly, either by purchasing new bonds or by selling some of their existing bonds directly to the Treasury to fund the Treasury general account. The outcome of scenario one is ultimately that interest rates surge in the short term, all of the economic uncertainty creates a panic, Congress is forced to act, the Fed and Treasury implement huge response programs, and ultimately everything will settle out in the long run, but not before a huge panic in the short term. Scenario two is a bit different. This would entail a default with plunging interest rates based on expectations of collapsing economic growth. Scenario two is more like the 2011 downturn, and you get declining expectations for economic growth, and you get probably a big response from the Treasury, but you don't get the Fed involved as much. Interest rates stay low, the economy muddles through. Scenario two is less panicky, but the Treasury is still forced to work around Congress, assuming they don't respond to the panic, and that would entail similar responses to what we saw in scenario one from Treasury. What's the most likely scenario here? I find it really hard to believe that we're even going to come to the default scenario. So I think Congress is most likely to get their act together at some point in the next couple of months and pass a bill. But the problem is that bill is likely to have big concessions, which means less government spending and increased recession risk down the line. I think there's two big conclusions from all of this. Number one, don't overreact to panicky headlines. You're going to read a ton of them in the next few months, and the likelihood of default is still extraordinarily low. The second big takeaway from all of this is stay diversified. Don't have concentrated positions in anything that can blow you up, because ultimately, this all comes down to whether the politicians are willing to roll the dice on all of this. I wonder if the Federal Reserve would buy a 3-year-old using the exigent circumstances clause.